So, welcome to tonight's episode of York Universe. Your hosts tonight are myself, Mary Helen Armour, and Paul Mackin. We also have our special guests, Robin Metcalf, who is a professor in the Division of Natural Science, and a Lassonde undergrad student, Nathan Minnock, who is also the president of Arbalest Rocketry, who was a member of our observatory staff, and they are here to talk with us tonight about some of the activities of some of the Lassonde students in a recent Canada launch competition. So welcome to York Universe, the astronomy and astrophysics radio podcast. It is written and directed and presented by the students, faculty, alumni, and friends of York University. You'll find us now wherever podcasts are distributed. We broadcast live every Monday night from the Allan Carswell Observatory, located at York University in Toronto, Canada. We broadcast at 9 p.m. Toronto local time, or currently 2 a.m. UT Eastern Central Standard UT. And at the same time, we run our online public viewing with our astronomy team. Hopefully the weather is looking pretty good tonight, so we might actually have some live images. To navigate our live show or to find out more on our website, you can go to www.yorkca/science/observatory and find the links to the online public viewing, or you will also see that here on our live YouTube stream. If you have any questions about any of our past shows, or if you have any suggestions for future topics, please email us at observe@yorku.ca. We will be monitoring the chat room on our YouTube broadcast for questions and to post content, so you can follow along there. Paul, I think you were going to give us a bit of an intro to the skies tonight.
Yeah, it's hello everyone. It's we're at the change of seasons. So now the summer Messier Fest is coming to an end. There's fewer galaxies in the eastern sky at night. They're sort of moving up to the zenith and starting to set a bit. And we're starting to get some planets back. At sunset, Saturn is just about to come up with the horizon. Around 10 11 o'clock, it's above the horizon. We're not quite at opposition yet. But we'll talk a little bit more about this. But this is a great opportunity to get outside and just look at the night sky. It's getting dark a little earlier. It's not really cold yet, although certainly do put a sweater on. And one of the things we'll talk about a bit later is using sort of modern technology, what are now called smart telescopes, and what they do. And we're going to talk a bit about how that ties into capturing great live images very easily with minimum investment and just a easy to use tool. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I think the first thing we want to hear about is the Rocket Fest, because it sounds like it was a great time.
It absolutely was.
Welcome,
Oh, yeah.
Robin, and welcome, Nathan. So I think you had a little bit to tell us about this competition and what you guys all did there.
Oh yeah,
Sure.
there's quite a bit.
Nathan, do you mind if I start? And then
Oh yeah.
I'll just say tell everyone about the event in general, and then it'd be great if you could tell us all about York's participation. If I could just start by saying that of all of the awesome stuff that I have done ever in this world, that this event is like a whole other universe of awesomeness. Okay. It was just like ridiculously cool. So what it all looks like, the event is attended by about 30 student rocketry teams from all across Canada, mostly university teams, but there were a couple of high school teams. So I think there was probably about 1,000 participants altogether. It's a week-long event in August that starts with a 2-day conference in Timmins, Ontario, in a community center. And during the conference portion, the student teams set up their rockets and they get them inspected. And just so that we all understand what this looks like, these aren't toy rockets. These are like 10 to 20-foot rockets capable of reaching tens of thousands of feet, designed and built by students. So the rockets are set up on tables, and while the teams are waiting for their inspection, they walk around and they chat with other teams and they get help from each other. It's the most like uncompetitive competition you can imagine. It's so supportive because all teams want everyone to get their rockets off the ground. So the amount of support that you saw among teams was just amazing. Okay, so that's going on. And then at the same time, there are various speakers from Canada's aerospace scene. And also each of the student teams gives a talk on their rocket project. So that's the Saturday and Sunday. And then on the Monday, everyone heads to a very remote location in the middle of the Northern Ontario bush. It's about 1.5-hour drive southwest of Timmins. So that's where the launch pads are. And this is where the awesomeness gets ramped up by like a billion. So now what happens is the teams have a 4.5-day launch window to get their rockets off the ground and to recover them out in the bush, which sometimes took hours of hiking in difficult terrain. And that was like a really intense, stressful 4.5 days. The teams are out there, they're in this mini desert surrounding by bush for long hours in the heat, minimal electricity, really no Wi-Fi or cell service. There's no actual bathrooms or running water. There's one food truck, and they are trying to solve extremely challenging problems together because of course, rockets like these, you can't test them beforehand, right? So, and then meanwhile, while they're working in these crazy conditions, high-powered rockets are going off like every hour or so. I think there was 100 launches in total, which was just mind-blowing to see. I will stop there.
So,
Oh, yeah.
so Robin, tell us
Yes.
about what your duties were as you were a Launch Canada volunteer. What was your like? We're
Sure.
going to hear from Nathan in a second, but what were your duties?
Yeah, very quickly. So I was on the media and comms team, and my duties were to basically get as much coverage of the event as possible. So I did that by getting video coverage of hours of interviews with all sorts of people, like the president of Launch Canada, the launch operators, sponsors, safety crew, lots of students, some of their parents. And I'm now in the process of stitching all that stuff together into shorter montages for the Launch Canada YouTube channel. So I had an
That's
absolute blast.
I can hear it in your voice, and we of course had spoken before you were going to do this. So this is exciting. And Nathan, what was the trip like for you? I mean, how many team members attended? I mean, it sounds like you were. I know that area, like up near Timmins. There's not a lot there. So where did you stay? I mean, were you camping or in a motel or something?
Oh yeah, yeah. We had so we brought around 11 members. Basically, everyone who I'd say contributed to our Rocket Goose 4. We rented out an Airbnb. It had 2 bedrooms, and basically how we like to kind of do things, we kind of just all sleep on the floor. With sleep. We bring sleeping bags, of course, and we kind of it's a little squished, but like, you
All
do what
11
you
of
have
you
to.
in
Yeah, all
together.
11 of us. Yeah, usually like 2 people on a bed, like 4 people sleeping on the floor in the same room, It's a quick, an interesting way of like kind of like living in Timmins.
Sounds a little cramped for my taste. I'm claustrophobic, but it sounds like you had a great time. And
Oh yeah.
how did the rocket go? I mean, it was you entered a rocket, the Arbalest rocket. What was Goose 3? What was it? Tell
So
us
it was
about it.
Goose 4. So our rocket, it's a 2-stage rocket, meaning it has like basically 2 motors essentially. Like it'll separate twice. It's around 5.3 meters in height, and it's around 109 millimeters in diameter. The rocket is pretty powerful. Uses a like two N class, one N class motor and an M class motor, which means like that's around like 6,000 newtons of thrust on the first stage and around 3,000 newtons of thrust on the second. It's very powerful and also very dangerous. So the thing about Goose 4 is that it's a very interesting rock because it took us 2 years essentially to develop, more like a year and a half. In all honesty, but like we tried launching it last year at Launch Canada and it ran into some issues. The main issues being the launch lugs and also the avionics, but primarily the launch lugs. As when we tried putting on the rail, let's just say the little metal slab that was holding on to the rail kind of bent forward, and as a result, we had to abort our launch last year.
So you didn't launch, or you did?
No, last year we didn't launch, but this year we did. This year.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah, so you like it's hard to launch, and there's
Oh
all
yeah.
what I've learned is that there's always some teams that don't get off the ground. And as I said, they have 4.5 days to do it, and they're so desperate to get it to happen. And then for all sorts of reasons it gets scrubbed, and it's heartbreaking.
Oh
Like
yeah.
this is a huge trip, and some of these teams are huge, and everything is on the line here. And to be scrubbed at the last minute is it's really disheartening.
It's
And if I
heartbreaking.
can just
Yeah.
if I can just add to Nathan's story, Nathan, you can tell us more about this, just to show the incredible dedication and resilience of Nathan's team. One of their team members in the middle of the week had to make the 7-hour drive an all-night drive all the way back to Toronto to
Oh
pick
yeah.
up a new motor, and then all the way back by the next morning.
Oh yeah.
Nathan, do you want to tell us
Oh
about
yeah,
that?
that was a crazy situation. So basically, it's kind of illegal for us to hold on to our current motors as none of us have the licensing. So Launch Canada essentially holds on to them. And what ended up happening is that they accidentally like forgot our motors on Monday, and like they had to send one of their guys to go back and bring it. And then we found out the next day on Tuesday that they brought the wrong motor. So we told ourselves, fine, okay, we're gonna send 3 of our members to go all the way back to Toronto, which is like a 7-hour drive, and then all the way back to the launch site, which is a 6-hour drive, and get the right motor so we can properly assemble the rocket and get off the launch rail. So those soldiers, they had to go through a 12-hour drive. Like they took shifts like of like some guys sleeping for 3 hours and the next guy would take the wheel and they just kept at it. Like they left around 5 p.m. I believe, and they managed to get to the launch site by 9 a.m. the next day. Like those guys are.
Yes, I remember seeing them. I think Jordan had the shakes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I was just so impressed with your team and your determination. It was really incredible.
Oh yeah.
This sounds fantastic. And these are solid fuel motors, right? These are
Yep.
they're not liquid fuel. So they're basically kind of explosive devices.
Oh yeah. They're hard to ignite, luckily, but they are effectively a very fancy explosive.
Right?
still,
That's incredible.
yeah, I still remember years ago someone explaining that rocketry was like strapping a bomb to your back end and hoping you go in the right direction.
Yeah. It's, I mean, many years ago, I was involved with model rocketry, but it was nothing. These were 30-centimeter tall little rockets, but you're dealing with things that are incredibly large. And how high did it go?
So our rocket, it went around, if my memory's not mistaken, it was around 13,000 feet. It wasn't as high as we had hoped, but it was still pretty high. That's above the clouds, basically. And I think it almost hit Mach 1. It was originally
Wow.
meant to go 27,000 feet, but due to a safety feature on board, it aborted the ignition of the second stage motor.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
And yeah,
it's
go ahead.
like most of the teams did not have a 100% successful
Oh no, no.
launch. Yeah, like
Uh,
typically at least one thing didn't work, whether it
I'm
was a
a
payload issue or yeah,
we
just because what they were doing is just so incredibly hard. And
yeah.
and that's perfectly okay. Like the whole point of the event is for the students to learn from their mistakes and to get better and better each year. And the York team was successful at two really important achievements,
We
which is they got their rocket off the ground and their parachute deployed, and not
Oh
all
yeah,
of the rockets did that.
we probably had the best recovery. We were an advanced launch pad because our rockets like considered under the advanced category. There's only 9 teams, and like a lot of the rockets
In
did
the
not.
advanced category.
Yeah, in the advanced category, and like the advanced rockets, a lot of them did not go well. Like one of them like snapped in half in the air. I believe Waterloo's had a kind of hit the ground hard and like got completely destroyed. I remember, I think
Hmm.
Carlton's also got completely destroyed. I know McGill had to abort their launch, and ETS also had to abort their launch. So
Oh,
yeah,
the
that.
McGill scrub was very heartbreaking because apparently the exact same thing happened to them last year. Same thing, like they went up until the very last possible minute and then it was aborted, and it was the exact same technical problem both times.
Oh dear.
And they were brokenhearted. I got this gut-wrenching video of them all with their arms all around each other as the launch operator was telling them that they wouldn't be able to launch, and it was hard.
I'm sure it was. You did recover your parachute work. What was the payload?
Yeah, that's what
Oh,
I was wondering. What does this thing have to carry?
It's an award-winning payload, the York
oh
team.
yeah. Oh
There you
yeah.
go.
So we had two payloads on board. So the first one was developed by our vice president, David. Well, I guess not anymore. He got an internship at MDA. Congratulations to him, by the way. But it's basically a vibration sensor. If and basically it's basically just meant to like detect the vibrations across the rocket as like the motor ignites. So there's that. Then there's the other payload, which is the biological payload, which was designed by me and my good
Oh,
friend Si
please don't tell me you sent a puppy up. That would be heartbreaking.
No puppies. That
No,
I can
no
guarantee.
puppies were
Or
injured,
hamster.
only algae.
Only algae, yes. But maybe we could do that for the next rocket. But yeah, so for our biological payload, so it was this algae, right? And essentially how it worked is that it basically when it feels like any sort of stress or vibrations, it starts to glow in the dark and it like has this really nice glow to it. My friend Saeed, he was working on it for his thesis. And essentially he wanted to basically see just how easily these algae could survive. Like I remember him telling me that like his lab and like most people thought that like the algae couldn't survive like the G's of like the rocket motor going off and that they'd probably be completely dead by the end of the trip, which apparently turned out not to be the case, which I'm very happy
Okay,
to
so
hear.
what were the results?
So I remember speaking to him. I am very bad with biology, by the way. I'm an engineer, but to my understanding, a good chunk of the algae actually survived the launch,
Hmm.
which meant his calculations were correct and were actually a very surprising result, as he was expecting almost all of them to be completely dead. Like I remember when we recovered the payload, he immediately brought out his microscope and we went to the pickup truck and like had the power on like the microscope so he could check them real quick. It was an interesting experience.
Hmm. So no, you couldn't see any images of the glow, right? I think you told me the
Um,
camera that
so
could see that didn't work.
so yeah, so when it how the like the engineering part, because I designed like the actual like the payload itself, not the algae, but like how it worked was like a 3D print with a camera that was slotted in and like secured by like four M5 bolts. Essentially, the issue of the run cam is that right before launch, how it works is that David's payload had two 7.4 volt batteries that were powering the camera.
Hmm.
And right before launch, what we have he had an issue where his magnetic switch broke. So what he had to do was he had to solder the wires to turn on the payload onto the rocket right before we left. So and because they aborted our launch, we had to or not abort our launch, but they delayed our launch. We had to wait at the recovery area for an hour,
Hmm.
which is so happens to also be the runtime of the batteries. So they were just kind of
Ah,
on sitting idle on the
oh
launch
no.
tower.
Is that why Jordan was walking around asking for bobby pins for that
Yeah.
soldering?
The bobby pins was for a different thing that was like related to just the
Oh, okay. Because
like
that's
when we
like,
were assembling
Jordan,
the
nobody wears
rocket.
bobby pins anymore. It's 2025. Uh, anyway, okay, so you won the award for you got third place out of
Oh yeah.
12 teams, I think, for the
Yeah.
payload. Do you know what it was specifically? Was it about the algae or the other one or?
So I don't know how they graded. So they when we were at conference day, there was two judges who came over and like were inspecting our payload and like other like teams' payload. They
Hmm.
liked a lot what we said. I know we lost a little bit of marks on the first day because because we didn't have the payload like assembled into like the nose cone, like show them how the assembly works. We only showed them that on the next day, and I think we
Hmm.
lost a few small points there. But like for the most part, I was told that like it was one of the most unique like payloads at the competition, as no one's really done anything like
Yeah,
that before.
it was. I thought it was really impressive that you won because you were up against some other really, really cool payloads. You probably saw there were a couple of teams that did like testing of human vertebrae, and like that stuff's really important. So
Oh yeah.
the fact that like yeah, the fact that you guys won it in third says a lot.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm so proud of like our team, man. Like I'm so happy we managed to get it because like I wasn't sure where we were gonna score, but like when I saw the results, man, I was the happiest person in the world.
Hmm. That's awesome.
So,
And I remember before you went, we talked a little bit about how hard it was going to be to recover this because you can't really control, other than very coarsely maybe, where it's going to come down. And the idea of trekking through the bush in August with machetes in mosquito territory just didn't sound that appealing to me. But I'm an old guy, so tell me about it. What happened?
Oh, so recovery went so much better than I expected. Like I remember when I was running the simulations and like I remember like, oh, we're gonna have to walk like 6 kilometers like through the forest. But like when we actually launched the rocket, first stage, it deployed perfectly, and like when it's 9 foot parachute deploy, it actually landed fairly close to it. It was like a 30-minute walk from like I believe it was the statics pad. Not the sorry, no, the tech development pad. And then our second stage, it also landed really close. So I guess I'll start talk about the second stage since that was the easier part of the rocket to get to. So it had two parachutes. It had a drogue, so a 2 foot parachute, and it had a main, which was I believe around a 7 foot. So when we went over there, because our second motor didn't ignite, it was still armed when it hit the ground. So we basically had to walk for not very long. I think I remember it being around 6 minutes. Of course, the environment's not the most pleasant. It's like very bushy. And there's mosquitoes everywhere. They're constantly trying to like bite you. Like I remember while I was walking with our team, like I was just like we were just slapping each other occasionally when a mosquito would land on ourselves. But
And
like
it was hot.
oh yeah, it was pretty hot, I remember. Very wet that day, but like because it rained then I believe overnight. So like
Hmm.
it was a very moist environment, which luckily didn't damage the electronics. So that was a concern that we had. But
That's that's
wait,
incredible. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
the
incredible.
bush is thick. It's quite
very
a
thick.
trek.
Oh
Hmm.
yeah. You have to be careful not to like let people like let the branches recoil back onto the person right behind you because that happened quite a few times.
Yeah. I heard all sorts of interesting stories from other teams about like for some of these students, it's their first time ever doing anything like that. And so they sort of would realize into it, oh, we should have left some markers, some trail markers so we knew where we'd come. And so then I think it was the Windsor team. They started laying out paper plates. Other teams were putting ribbons on trees. So, some interesting problem solving.
Oh
That's
yeah.
wild. That's incredible.
Oh yeah.
Hmm.
So do you have plans for next year? Have you got new projects
Oh
or?
yeah, we're going the biggest we've ever done. So for our next two projects, so we're actually doing well, not really two rockets, but two projects next. So one rocket, which we're trying to get to be launched in tech development category next year at Launch Canada. We're calling it Red Robin. It's going to be a rocket with full active control, probably the first rocket at the competition to have full active control, meaning it can kind of like move in all three directions, like roll, pitch, yaw. But of course, it's not meant to target anything. It's just meant to kind of like keep it as stable as possible to kind of like show off like the tech and aerodynamics of the rocket, as we're not going for altitude anymore, and it's more so trying to make a very advanced rocket with our new team, who I think is very capable of meeting up the challenge. And then our other project will be our liquid engine. This will be a very big undertaking which I'm so excited to work on, which is good for the first year is going to be like done on a test stand so we can like demonstrate and like, test like if the engine actually works or not. And once it actually does prove to be a successful engine, we're going to be mounted it onto a rocket we're going to be calling Moose One, which will essentially be our magnum opus. We also hope to have active control on that rocket, and probably instead of launching it at Launch Canada, we're more likely going to launch it at MLS, the Maritime Launch Services.
Awesome. That is awesome.
Now, just a question about your liquid fuel engine. Right now, you're buying, I gather, your solid fuel engines. Are you going to be machining your liquid fuel
Yep.
engine, the nozzle,
Oh
the
yeah.
engine components as well?
Yep. Yep.
Wow, wow,
Yeah.
that is
Isn't
so
it
cool.
amazing? Hmm.
That is so cool. I'm really impressed. This is incredible work, and what a great opportunity for young engineers.
Oh yeah. It
You
is.
know,
Paul,
and
it's the most
maybe
inspiring experience seeing these teams. It really is. It's just
uh,
incredible.
and your team, are you looking to add new people to it?
Oh yeah.
We're starting a new school year now, so there's a whole bunch of first year students, a whole bunch of frosh coming in, and sounds to me like you've got an opportunity to recruit.
Oh yeah, we're planning that exactly. We want to get quite a few, not too many, because we want to be able to give enough people like something to work on. So, but we're trying to expand our team drastically from prior years because of the new projects we're onboarding and because of the complexity. Of course, we want more people in mechanical, especially. We want a lot of people in ground station and liquid. Like we already were at the conference day, or not, sorry, orientation day. And like we talked to a lot of first years, and a lot of them are really excited. We got to display our massive rocket, like for both orientation days, and like our desk was just filled with so many first years who
Hmm.
like really want to join.
And they're also, Nathan, you're also interested, I think you mentioned, in students from outside engineering to help
Oh
out
yeah,
with
oh yeah,
media and graphic design and
oh yeah.
yes?
Yeah, well, lots of that. We don't just want engineers. Engineers, like they design stuff, but you can't just run a club of engineers. So like there's lots of people who love from Schulich, from business, from other
Hmm.
departments, from media, like any like we'll take anyone from any department. Like what we mainly look for is people who have initiative. That's kind of like what I look for in a person. If like the person like enjoys what they're doing, like they really want to help out, that's all I need to hear.
Awesome.
Amazing, amazing. I think. Do you have a website or something
Yeah, we
that
do.
people can go to sign up or see more of your work?
So we do have, in fact, have a website. Our main like point of communication is through our Discord server, which I think is public now, so you should be able to search it up. Our website, you can just search up Arbalest Rocketry, and it'll be the first result. Like, it's getting updated, but like for the most part, I say it's fairly decent. Um, and then we also have a YouTube channel, which we don't upload much on it, although we're maybe uploading a Goose 4 video soon to it.
Hmm. And if anyone is interested in seeing some of the amazing like drone footage of the launches, Launch Canada has a YouTube channel as well, and they really went in with all of the video coverage this summer, and it's pretty amazing.
That's great. That's great. It's yeah, drones are a lot of fun for taking pictures of that sort of thing. And wow, I maybe next year I'll try and come up myself. This is fantastic. Just so pleased to hear how well you did, and
Mm,
it's just it speaks well of the university, but it also speaks well of other universities, and including high schools who said that we're also
Oh yeah.
there, and what an exciting time for them. That's fantastic.
yeah, yep, definitely.
So. So, thank you for telling us about your adventure, and
Our
I
pleasure.
think we'll see. I think we see if we can get your link up on the podcast page for this. But I think, Mary Helen, we're coming up to reminder time.
Yeah, we're coming up on halftime, so thank you very much, Robin and Nathan, for coming on. That was just, I
Thank
think,
you for having us.
fascinating
Yeah, our
for all
pleasure.
our listeners. So a reminder, you are listening to York Universe. We are broadcasting live from the Allan Carswell Observatory at York University in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Please check out our website at yorku.ca/science/observatory. to join the chat on YouTube that's going on right now. If you have any questions or want to see older content, it's also available on the YouTube channel. Tonight, you are listening to myself, Mary Helen Armour, and my co-host, Paul Mackin. So we have been discussing this amazing student rocketry project at York University, but now we're going to sort of move on into sort of more of our typical topics. But just a quick reminder, as always, on Wednesday nights we host live tours. If the weather is good this Wednesday, we will be having an arboretum tour where you can come and look through some of the telescopes. Just check on our website to book a ticket. The tickets are free. We just have people book so we have some idea of how many people might show up. So Paul, we had a couple of sort of interesting sort of in astronomy history. Speaking of sort of rockets and space flight, on September 8th, 2016 was when they launched OSIRIS-REx. OSIRIS-REx stands for Origins Spectral Interpretation, Resource Identification, and Security Regolith Explorer. That's a heck of a mouthful. But this was the space mission that was launched towards the asteroid Bennu. And I know we've talked on York Universe before about this whole mission and sort of the sample return. It was a sample return mission, which is quite challenging, especially because Bennu was quite a small object. The probe actually reached Bennu after 2 years of flight, sort of in December 2018, and it was almost another 2 years before it took a sample in October 2020, and it finally returned to Earth in September 2023. So you can see how sample return missions can be quite long lasting missions. But OSIRIS-REx has gone on to another target. They're now calling it OSIRIS-APEX for that reason. And it's heading to another asteroid, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this, Apophis, and it will reach that in 2029. So OSIRIS-REx is still going, and hopefully in another 4 years it reaches another target. So it's been quite a fascinating mission because it was successful in its sample return, although there were some technical problems when it first hit the ground. Uh, but it has been sort of a fascinating mission. These sort of sample returns that are now starting to happen are kind of cool.
Yeah, it's incredible. They actually got there and they got a bigger sample than they thought they would. They originally aiming to get about 60 grams, and I think they got like 3 or 4 times that. But then when they got the capsule, the sample return capsule home, they couldn't get it open. It was cold welded shut, and of course they had to be very careful because they didn't want to contaminate the sample at all. And they've been doing analysis on the sample. They found a fair bit of water in it, which is consistent with some models for how water got on Earth and whatnot. And solar system formation. And interestingly, they then redirected. NASA always, well, all space agencies now over-engineer their spacecraft, so there's always an extended mission. And sending it to Apophis is really quite fascinating because that is a near-Earth asteroid. That's a near-Earth asteroid, and it was actually thought for a while that it might impact, first in 2029 and then subsequently. But it's been shown that it'll come close but not impact. But they're actually going to go and take a look at this asteroid as it comes very close to Earth. Then while we don't get a lot of large object impacts anymore, we get a few, brighter meteorites, but we have to watch this. And I once heard a joke that the thing that dinosaurs never had a space program, and if they did, there'd probably still be dinosaurs. But we have to protect ourselves, and one of the things that missions like this allow us to do is not only understand the science of solar system formation and whatnot, but also how to protect ourselves against impact. And there's a whole series of missions along that line. But this is I've always been fascinated by asteroid missions. And so occasionally they'll tack them on an asteroid flyby onto other missions and so on. But OSIRIS-REx, and you do have to love the acronym, but the OSIRIS-REx mission is a huge success.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's like I said. I mean, the idea of heading for comets and asteroids really started with Halley's Comet, quite a back in the sort of mid '80s. But they've been getting progressively more and more complex, and even trying to put landers. I mean, of course, there was the Rosetta mission in the Philae lander, and for the life of me now, I can't remember the name of the comet, even if I remember the mission. But that was sort of a precursor to this kind of thing. And I think Bennu is even the real challenge was Bennu was also how small it is. I mean, comets are, kilometers across, whereas Bennu, I think, is what, only a few hundred meters in size. So, the smaller it gets, the harder this gets to catch up and land on. So, quite an interesting feat, and it just keeps getting, more and more complex, these kinds of missions that they are running. But I think you had something sort of much further back in history. Um,
I I did, and it actually ties into what I was talking about a little bit at the beginning of the show, and we'll get more into this as we go through this item. But on September 30th, 1880, astronomers Henry Draper and Mary Ann Palmer Draper, husband and wife, succeeded in capturing the first photographic image of Messier 42, the Great Orion Nebula. Now, this was early days for photography. So let's talk about the process. They would take glass plates coated with silver nitrate. They would expose it through the telescope with, a system of projection lenses onto the glass plate. The glass plates weren't the silver nitrate wasn't particularly sophisticated in terms of films, film media standards. So it was not that light sensitive. They would expose it for quite a long time, carefully guiding the telescope as best they could, and they would get an image. And what you'd expect it to be about what it was. It's kind of a fuzzy image of a fuzzy object, but revolutionary. And what we discovered through photographing things is that, as the techniques got better and better, that photographs capture more information than the human eye does, which is why often, we talk about public outreach. When people look through a telescope, depending on the object they look at, they can be a little underwhelmed because they see wonderful pictures and books and astronomy calendars and whatnot. And then when they look through a telescope, their eye's not really trained to capture that information. So cameras are much better because we can get a lot of photons in, and they do a really good job of capturing the images. And then you can also process that data, because that's what it is. It's data now. It's not photons hitting silver nitrate. It's photons hitting cameras. So there's been a real revolution in astronomy, and this actually comes back to what I was talking about earlier. One of the little projects I'm working on over this week, because we've got some nice skies, is every night I've got one of my small telescopes, not actually a telescope, something called an astrograph or a smart telescope. And you can't look through it, but you can take pictures with it. And I've got it looking at the same four objects overnight, an hour on this one, and 90 minutes on this one, 2 hours on that one, and so on. And then I will stack all that data together and develop some very good images with an extremely inexpensive telescope. And those are the same sort of tools that professional astronomers have used for many years, but they're now coming to the public. And this is a bit of a revolution. And when I say these things are inexpensive, we're talking a couple of $100s for the low end ones. And it really is opening up the public to great opportunities for observing. And perhaps we'll talk more about this later. But it all started back in September 30th, 1880. That's when astrophotography began effectively. And now here we are. we're now doing people doing it in their backyard. As my telescope's operating right now with no human intervention. And at the end of the sometime on the weekend, I'll start stacking the images on my computer, and I'll produce pretty good images. With a $500 telescope. So that's kind of remarkable.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, these two were amateur astronomers as well, and people don't realize, I think, how much amateur astronomers have contributed to the science, because in some way there's just so much to observe. A lot of comets are actually found by more amateur observers because they just have sort of the time to sort of scan the skies because they can. Like, I mean, the big telescopes, you're usually looking at something very specific. You're not going to randomly scan the sky hoping to find something. So, like, the fact that it was amateur astronomers that captured this first photographic image is very reflective, I think, of what's going on in the science of astronomy. I mean, if you even look at someone like Percival Lowell, he was kind of, a rich kid who could afford to build himself an observatory because he came from a very rich Boston family, but he wasn't a professional astronomer. And yet the Lowell Observatory did a lot of good work. Like, he ended up hiring professionals and stuff. But it's kind of fascinating, I think, the relationship between amateur astronomers and so the progression of the science, simply because there's so much out there. There's a lot of room for amateurs to contribute with a lot of observations, or even just, processing data, because, especially with something like Vera Rubin coming online, or when the Kepler project started bringing in data, the sheer volume of data makes it almost impossible for the professional community sometimes to get through all of it. So yeah, it's kind of
It's
interesting.
really incredible. It's really incredible. Many years ago, someone said to me that astronomy is one of the very few sciences where, to this day, amateurs make a serious contribution. From simple things like processing data up to assigned research, lending their telescopes to assigned research. It's fascinating. And you talked about data processing. One of my favorite stories about that is that when NASA was launching the Juno spacecraft to Jupiter, they weren't going to put a camera on it, and there was some public outcry about this, so they decided to add the webcam project, which was not part of Juno's original mission mandate at all. They put it on there, and they've been uploading a constant stream of images taken by this camera. It's been a huge success, and all of the data is processed by the amateur community. And if you actually look up just online Juno spacecraft images, you'll see not only is it amazing science, but it's artistic, because people with different skill sets are processing it. So they process some incredibly beautiful images, and absolutely worth looking at. But again, it all started with strong. I suppose ultimately you could go back to the first astronomers. They were amateurs. They were self-trained and so on. They weren't taking astronomy courses at university and doing their PhDs. They were self-taught. And when I've been doing astrophotography since the 70s, and I had to learn a lot of stuff myself. Now that I'm studying it, I'm learning the professional techniques, but amateurs make amazing contributions in this space.
Oh, and I think from the time the telescope came online as an astronomical tool, you've had people who were, hired by Paris observatories and Greenwich observatories and stuff, but you still had an awful lot of people who built their own telescopes and contributed. I mean, Herschel essentially was a self-taught amateur, both him, and I guess he taught his son, and he brought his sister into the whole project, and they contributed hugely to the science. So I think we sometimes, the amateurs don't get enough recognition, or we don't realize that some of these people that we sort of laud in the name of, discoveries like the Herschels actually sort of started out as amateur observers. One of the observers who worked for Hubble, I think his name was Humison, Milton Humison. who worked at the observatory with him, was just an amateur who got into it, and yet he contributed, quite a lot of the observing that Hubble later used to figure out his expanding universe. So it's like I said, it's a science where, like it's still very broad based because a lot of people can contribute. I mean, even things like some of these citizen science projects now, where you can contribute, online analysis and stuff, and planet hunting and all these other kinds of things that go on. It's really quite fascinating. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's incredible. And I noticed, just as a side note, that we've got some live images right now on the OPV. You can actually see the telescope field of view. Really interesting image. I think that's the Wild Duck Nebula, I'm guessing. But you can actually see a satellite go by on the image right now, and you can also see our software for guiding the telescope. So if anyone wants to take a look at that, we're showing some great images with our 1 meter telescope while we continue our podcast.
yeah. So speaking of leading from the Kepler mission into sort of more modern discoveries, of course, Kepler really, really found so many potential exoplanets. And one of the interesting ones was the TRAPPIST system. And now that we sort of know they're there, the James Webb Telescope has been going through some of these TRAPPIST objects to take a better look at them. Some of the most recently released information is on TRAPPIST-1e. So this is sort of the planetary system around the TRAPPIST-1 star. And when you look at like TRAPPIST-1e or D or C, the letter refers to sort of the different planets in that solar system. So there are 7 Earth-sized worlds orbiting that dwarf star TRAPPIST-1. TRAPPIST-E, of course, is of, a fair bit of interest because it's in that sort of what we call habitable zone, where you're at the right distance from the star so that water, in theory, could remain a liquid on the surface. That doesn't mean it is, but it's at a distance where it gets enough energy from the star that water could be melted, but not so much heat that it would be boiled away. So it's kind of one of those ones that are quite interesting. So James Webb has been taking a look at it. They think it's unlikely it has any kind of atmosphere, partly because TRAPPIST-1 is a fairly active star, so the flares are going to contribute to blowing an atmosphere off the surface, even if it had an atmosphere. That doesn't mean an atmosphere can't develop later on. Um, but it may not ever develop that secondary atmosphere either. So it's one of those ones, they're kind of interested in because of its position. Um, so yeah, it's one of those ones you don't really know, but we've now reached the point with the James Webb where having Kepler having found all these potential exoplanets, we can now go back with the James Webb and take more detailed images. Can we find an atmosphere? Is there potentially sort of water? Because you can find some signatures of some of these compounds in the various spectra that you can take. So the question is, what's going on with TRAPPIST E, as well as all of the other ones. So they're just starting to sort of take a more detailed look at these different objects. But as like I said, the TRAPPIST system is interesting because you do have Earth-sized planets, and you can start to look at the potential for atmospheres and possibly water on the surface.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think about exoplanet discovery, and I think it was like 1998, which doesn't seem like that long ago, but then you realize it's almost 30 years ago that the first real exoplanet discovery started to occur, and the techniques were primitive, and they found one, they didn't find some more for a while, and then they found a couple more, but then it started to accelerate. And now, we talk about amateurs, but even students. I mean, at York, our third year astronomy students actually have a project where they have to detect an exoplanet. Now, they don't have to detect a new exoplanet. They don't have to discover something new, but they have to take an exoplanet, detect its light curve, do some calculations on it. So this is actually becoming relatively mundane. And, I think the first time I ever talked on any of the York U podcasts a couple of years ago about exoplanets, we had about 2,500. And now we're way over 5,000, and rapidly closing in on 6. And this is a steady stream of discoveries. It's only going to be some time until we make a breakthrough discovery where we find one that is, that absolutely has an atmosphere and is in the habitable zone. That doesn't mean to say it's going to have life, because there's a whole bunch of different factors. But I think we're getting closer and closer to that discovery, and our techniques are still somewhat primitive. They still lead us to look for planets of a certain type, of certain characteristics of planets. But again, the techniques and when we get into chronographs and so on, the techniques are improving, and eventually we may be able to, in not too distant future, I think the Nancy Grace telescope has the opportunity to directly image planets and look at their atmosphere. So that's all coming down the pipe. It's really kind of incredible, the progress we're making in this area.
Yeah, I mean I think that's where Kepler contributed so heavily, because before that you were talking a few dozen exoplanet, and it was Kepler that boosted that up into the thousands, with all of the sort of signature detections, because Kepler could scan for the planets, and now you can take your James Webb and later other telescopes and actually, focus in where there's likely to be one, because something like James Webb, you just couldn't search with planets with it. It wouldn't work. But because of the way Kepler
Right.
was designed, it could observe like tens, if not hundreds of thousands of stars at a time. So they're very different missions, but they're very complementary, because Kepler found the targets, and now James Webb can go and find them. Um, so it's been quite, like, over the last 20 years, it's been quite interesting to sort of follow. I mean, I still remember, like when they first found 51 Pegasus, the first exoplanet. It was Jupiter size and close to the star, and everybody was like, how the heck did you get something weird like this? And then there was speculation, like, what's going on? Why are we But it was a bias, right? Like, it was easier to detect with the methodologies big planets close to the stars, and they found quite a few of them, and they were rather surprised because they couldn't figure out how they would form there. But with Kepler, we found like much more of the sort of Earth-sized planets. I still remember looking at sort of the original mission design of Kepler, and they were hoping to find like 300 Earth-size type planets. Well, I think they've kind of well exceeded that.
Oh,
I,
I think they came in at like close to 2,000 on that mission alone.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, so it really is quite remarkable what they've discovered, and this is a burgeoning area of study. You're going to, a year from now, I don't know how many we'll have, but it won't be that long before we go to 5,000, from 5,000 to 10,000. There is now some speculation that really every star is going to have planets, or most stars. So we'll see, but we're learning, and science is not science doesn't have all the answers, but it's always adding new answers, which is part of the joy of study, I think. But closer to home, we've got a comet. Everyone's talked about the new Atlas comet. That's an interstellar comet. You're not going to be able to see that really from Earth without a telescope. Although it's going to be observable from Mars, and there's a couple of spacecraft that'll look at it as it close approach to the sun, and certainly getting some interesting information about the tail. But a more mundane telescope, comet is comet C25 A6 Lemon. That's with two M's, Lemmon, and it's approaching Earth. And it's it's going to be closest to the Earth on October 20th, and it may well be bright enough to be seen with the naked eye. And we're going to talk a bit about how you'd find it as we go on today. But so this comet was discovered at the Mount Lemmon Observatory, hence the name, using a 1.5 meter reflecting telescope equipped with a basically a 10 megapixel camera. Just doing the calculation in my head there. The telescope is located in Arizona as part of the Stewart Observatory, just south of the city of Tucson. And it basically has a mission to scan for comets and asteroids. As I said, asteroid defense is something we should all, if we think about such things, should think about that a fair bit. And most of the missions from this observatory have been asteroids, more than 50,000. But every once in a while they catch a comet, and that was the case here. So it was first found in the summer by David Fulls, and it's believed that they initially believed they found another asteroid. It appeared as nothing more than a tiny star-like speck, quite dim, magnitude 21.5. That's really dim. I think 1 million times dimmer than the faintest star you can see with the naked eye under perfect seeing conditions. But they started to see a tail, and they've observed a whole bunch of positions between November 2024 going back and August 14th. And it's found that its closest point to the sun will be at about half an AU, half the distance from the Earth to the sun. And it will come closest to the Earth on October 20th, when it will be about, it's not really particularly close, but 55 million miles, or 89 million kilometers. So to put that in perspective, that is 4 times, that's 40 times further away than the moon. I'm going to do this off the top of my head here, than the moon is to Earth. But it's apparently a repeating comet. It's been here before. Looking at the orbit, it seems to have been here once before, many times before, but the last visit was about 1,350 years. But, and this is really quite cool, and it explains to you some about how we use planets to manipulate the orbits of spacecraft as well. So apparently it came relatively close to Jupiter, which caused it to lose some orbital momentum to Jupiter, which slowed it down a little bit. And that will actually shorten its orbital period by about 200 years. So no one listening to this is going to be around in 1,100 years to see it, but it is getting a little shorter in its orbit. Now, what's really cool about this comet is it might get to visible light magnitude. And we've included a picture. We're running out of time, but we've included a picture on our podcast site. But if on October 12th you go outside and you look at the Big Dipper, and you take the handle of the Big Dipper and draw a curl through the 2 stars on the bucket nearest the handle, kind of a curve downward, you should point at the comet. If you're out in the country, you might be able to see it with the naked eye. Binoculars would certainly help. But we have included an image, and there's lots of information online on how to find it. But there's maybe for the autumn we'll get a nice visible comet. That would be kind of a treat.
Yeah, I mean, visible comets are not that common, but it would be cool if we actually managed to get a good look at it. So
because it won't be back for 1,100 years. So
yeah. It's not like Halley's Comet that, comes back regularly, but yeah, a lot of them are sort of returners. It just may be, this is much more of a long period comet, and you'll see it once in your lifetime and you won't see it again. So I think though we're coming to the end of our broadcast. I think we've had some great discussion tonight, especially with our special guests. Um, so you have been listening to the York Universe, the Astronomy and Astrophysics podcast, written and presented by the students, faculty, alumni, and friends of York Universe. Your hosts this evening have been myself, Mary Helen Armour, and my co-host, Paul Mackin. This podcast and past episodes are available wherever podcasts are distributed. You can always connect with us on Instagram at the handle at YorkU Observatory, or on Facebook at Allan I Carswell Ob. Our website is yorku.ca/science/observatory. And there we have a lot of interesting comment, a link to our YouTube page where you can listen to this podcast as well as seeing the observing and images we showed tonight. If you still feel inclined, we always appreciate any donations which are Canadian tax deductible to our student-operated not-for-profit observatory. Thanks for tuning in this evening. We wish you clear skies and a good night.
Good night, everyone.